Okay. Good morning. Okay. I want to talk today about the minhag of sleeping, the minhag of not sleeping in the sukkah. It's primarily known as a Chabad minhag. Chabad, they don't sleep in the sukkah. There are other chassidim that also don't sleep in the sukkah, like, by and large. I think a lot of Bells doesn't sleep in the sukkah. And also a lot of people don't sleep in the sukkah. It's not so common to sleep in the sukkah. So it's not really like the most obscure minhag in the world. Today, I think there's a lot more medaktikim, and there's a lot more people who do sleep in the sukkah. Sukkahs got bigger and better, and heaters are more available and whatever, but there's plenty of people who don't sleep in the sukkah. So now I want to talk about the discussion about not sleeping in the sukkah a little bit, and some of the backlash. Now, there is a gadol in Eretz Yisrael who was nifter about 6 months ago, who I was a big fan of, if you're allowed to say that. His name is Reb Meir Mazuz. He's not the most well-known person in the world. He was a Sephardi Rosh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak, in a yeshiva called Kisei Rachamim. He published probably, 25 svarim on Kol Miktzayos HaTorah, Kol Chelkei HaTorah. He literally knew everything. He knew everything. Every type of interesting thing. They put out every week from him. After his wife died, like 15 years ago, he started saying shir, Moitzi Shabbos in Bnei Brak, and it was like a shir on like a wide-ranging shir on any type of topic that could be covered, and they started publishing like a gillion every week from his stuff on Shabbos. And we had 2-3 of them that would float around the shul over here. I know I'm not going to out anybody, but I know who else was reading them also. He was very, very interesting collection, very interesting man. He had a lot of interesting flavor. Originally, his shir was on the radio in Israel, like every Motzei Shabbos. His shir was on the radio in Israel also, like a Ravadia, but they took it off the radio because he would quote too many sources that weren't like, perfect sources. So he was a very interesting man, a very wide-ranging, interesting man. Could talk about anything. He could talk about anything. Now he was born in Tunis, in Tunisia. He was a Rebbe in Tunisia until 1971 or 72, I think, when his father was murdered, actually, by a terrorist in Tunisia, and he and his family migrated to Eretz Yisrael, and he became the Rosh Yeshiva of Kisei Rachamim in Bnei Brak, which he was the Rosh Yeshiva of for decades. It grew into a huge maisid that had like boys' schools, girls' schools, kollel, probably had thousands, probably over 10,000 alumni. It grew into a very large maisid. He was nifter a few months ago now. I think his children are in charge of it. Now, in Tunis, where he was, when he was a Rebbe and his father was a Yeshiva, it was before the days of Kisei Rachamim, of his yeshiva that opened. Him and his father were both Rebbeim in a local Lubavitcher yeshiva in Tunis. And because of that, he was a Rebbe there for 10 years in Tunis in the Lubavitcher yeshiva. His father left much sooner. But because of that, 10-year relationship, he was a Rebbe in Chabad for 10 years in Tunis. He had a very warm relationship with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was a big, he held of him very stark. He spoke about him, spoke very nicely about him, said a lot of things about him. So when I read from this, I want to say it's together Nemanim Pitzei Oyev. He was a lover of the Rebbe and of Chabad, but he has this kuntras that he put out. He republished it many times in his life. He published it 4 or 5 times in different svarim. It's called the kuntras al titesh teres yimecha. The audience that he's addressing is not me and you. The audience that he's addressing is Svardim who become Chabad or Breslov, which is not such an uncommon phenomenon. Like Svardim who become, they went to Chabad yeshivas or Breslov yeshivas, and they start taking on the minhagim of Lubavitch and of Breslov. That's who his target audience is, that group of people who are Svardim b'Makar, who become Chabad or Breslov. But in it, it's like 30 pages of blistering cynicism and critique of everything that isn't appropriate about anyone, any movement or any minhagim that he doesn't like. And he goes through a lot of different things in there. And I just want to start off a little bit just to give you a flavor. The first page he starts off is very interesting. It's highly partisan, but very entertaining. He starts off as follows. He says, Kol habaki b'halacha yedeya. You'll like this. Sheroiv kichol minhagi esvardim yisaydesim b'harari kedem. Most of the minhagim of the Svardim come from the main source. The Svardi minig is the main minig. The 2 major camps by the Ashkenazim, Hema Litavim v'Achsidim, Yonkim v'Shayivim Mayanaseh. They're really all just nursing off Svard's minhagim. Ki keyidua ikes sifrei hamusar etzel Litavim hem cheves halvavis shari tshuva l'Rebbeinu Yonah Mesilas Yesharim Shlashtem Mechaberim Svardim. Okay, this is not fully true already, but those 3, he says, were all Svardim. Iker Chasidus, Yenekes Mibakaris HaKabbalah, Kidua HaMakobalim Rishainim, was Reb Ezra, Rizriel, the Ramban, Reb Yosef Dikuktila, Reb Meir Ben Gaber, Reb Yehuda Chayat, the Ramak, V'oid, all the Musvardim also. He says in the Iker, in the Iker, Sifrei HaMachshava of the Maral, Uchadaima, are also Yonik from Sifrei HaSvardim, which is the Mer Nevuchim, the Ralbag, the Sefer Ikrim, the Rabbanel, V'oid. The Paiskim Rishainim Ba'ilim, the first Paiskim in the world, Shekinsu Kol HaTalmud, the Halachas Psukis, who established everything in the Halachas Psukis, is a Rif, Rambam. Sefer Adiktik Rishainim is Menachem ben Saruk, Hasagis Donish ben Levrat, Rav Yoina ben Ganach, the Rav Ben Ezra, Rav Yosef Kimchi, Rav Moshe, the Radak, v'chulu. Then he says the Paitanim Rishainim was Rav Shlomo ben Megabiro, Rav Yehuda Alevi, Rav Moshe ben Ezra, Rav Rama ben Ezra, v'chein. So he says almost everything important, be it Machshava, Halacha, Piyut, Shira, whatever it is, it comes from the Svardim. Everything comes from the Svardim. So he says, why feel like a second-class citizen? We're the main thing. Everybody else is just being yonik from us. So there's zikr no reason to change any minig, a Sephardi minig ever, to an Ashkenazi minig. Now, all the way on page 30 at the end of the Kuntras, he does bring that there are a few unfortunate examples where the minig of the Ashkenazim is more muvusas, is a better minig, but those that can be counted on one hand, and it's not, not to be not to be taken so seriously. He does. On the last page of the Kuntras, Amnam yesh min hagam lachenu Ashkenazim. There are a few that are more authentic by the Ashkenazim, but don't thing. Now, in the middle, the 20 pages between that opener and that ending, he goes after the more controversial minhagim, amongst Chassidim, but particularly Svardim. Meaning it starts with, particularly Lubavitch. Meaning he starts with Svardim, with Chassidim in general, and then he moves on to particular Lubavitch Chassidim. And in there he goes through a lot of different things. I'm not going to read all of it. It's highly entertaining. Not all of it. I'm saying whatever. It's very entertaining. You can read it with a grain of salt, but it's highly entertaining. But in there, he goes through a few different minhagim, and one of them is the minig of Sukkah. So I want to skip to there and talk about it. So he talks about the minig of not sleeping in the Sukkah. Now, the problem is as follows. If you look in a Shulchan Aruch, take a Rambam, take a Torah, take any of the Sifrei Halacha, it's really an open-shut story. There's not really much to talk about. It's pretty clear that there's a mitzvah, there's a chiyuv to sleep in the sukkah. As a matter of fact, the Munkach Rebbe makes a diak that the Gemara in Sukkah, in the beginning of the second parak, says, Hayashin tachas hamita is layatzi de chevase. He says, it doesn't say not yotzi mitzvase, layatzi de chevase. Right? This is a chiyuv to sleep in the sukkah. And this person is not being yotzi his chiyuv because he's sleeping under the bed. That's his diak. Now, the Gemara in several places talks about it. Now, if you look in Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Tafresh Lamed Tes and Sif Beis, it says Oichlim v'Shoisim v'Yeshenim b'Sukkah, mitzvah stam kepshutai. We eat, we drink, and we sleep in the Sukkah. Kol shiva bein b'yoyim bein b'layla, ve'in Yeshenim chutz l'Sukkah afilu shinas harai. You're not allowed to sleep out of the Sukkah, even a shinas harai, even a temporary sleep. Aval mutar lechal achilas harai chutz l'Sukkah. You're allowed to eat a small eating, and not kavod eating outside the Sukkah. Now, from this, many places can point out that l'chayr there's even a certain chaymer, like a chumrah that sleeping has over eating. Eating is only by kviya suda. But if you are doing an achilas harai, not a kavod suda, you don't have to do it in the sukkah. But by shina, there's no such dispensation. By shina, even if it's a shinas harai, you have to do it in the sukkah. So many places can point out, amongst them obviously Rabbi Mazuz, that shina seems to be more chamor than eating in the sukkah. Now, so where does it start? L'maisa, like we said in the opener over here, it's not only specific Kreisen that don't sleep in the sukkah. By and large, a lot of people don't sleep in the sukkah. So where did this mitzvah of shina b'sukkah, which seems to be so basic, it's Gemara's Mufarash, it's Shulchan Aruch Mufarash, go to? So right after Nart and Tafresh Lamed Tes and Sif Beis, there's a Ramah. There's an interesting Ramah over it. The Ramah says like this: U'mashe noyigin lahakal achshav b'shina. Now this predates everything. This predates all the conversation. This predates everything. The Ramah says this, that the velt is noyig lahakal achshav b'shina, not to sleep in the sukkah. She'en yishenim b'sukkah raka medaktik in b'mitzvahs. That the only ones who sleep in the sukkah are those who are medaktik in mitzvahs. Yesh omer mishum tzina. There are those who say it's because of the cold. Yesh tsar litin b'mekayim sakarim. It's painful to sleep in a place that's very cold. They lived in Eastern Europe. It's very cold. The linera says the Ramah, I don't think that's the reason. I think the reason is mishum the mitzvah sukkah ishu beisai ish ve'ishtay. Kederach shu dar kol hashana. The mitzvah is to sleep together with your wife as a couple. That's the mitzvah. Since the sukkahs, you're not able to sleep with your wife because generally people have families and you're sleeping with the family. You're not sleeping, as a couple. Potter. But says the Ramah, it's best, says the Ramah, to be machmer and have a sukkah where you can sleep with your wife so that you can be machmer. This is the Ramah. So now the Ramah really opens up this conversation that even though sukkah, sleeping in the sukkah seems to be a din pasha that everyone's mechuyev to do, Lamaisa only Medaktikim do it. The Ramah says it himself. Now, where's the Ramah coming from? He's really quoting a Mordechai in the second parak of Sukkah, and the Darkei Moshe brings it, where the Mordechai says as follows. The Mordechai says, Aval ha'olam samchu al davar zeh, sheyireim mitzina, ve'efshe mizen is fashat haminik sherabim mekilim b'shina b'sukkah. The Mordechai says, people are chayshish that it's very cold and that can be dangerous. They're not comfortable when it's very, very cold. And he says it could be because of that, is where it's fashat the minig, not to sleep in the sukkah. So sometimes the Mordechai already, one of the Rishonim, is telling us that the minig was already not so enough as to sleep in the sukkah. And there's a Meiri like that as well, and there's Rav Moshe min Arbona, a third Rishon. All three of them seem to be being made the same thing, that the minig already in the Tkufas Rishonim, in areas where it was cold, was not to sleep in the sukkah because of the cold. Now, so the Ramah over here is bringing like call it a hodgepodge of reasons, right? He brought the svara of cold, which seems to be regular din of mitzvah. Then he brought something about ishva ishta, which is maybe a teshuvah came to dur svara. He's not really telling you which one he holds as the main svara. In the Ramah, in the Hagais and Shulchan Aruch, he seems to be being madcha, the cold thing, and saying like that's not really a tam maspik, but ishva ishta is the real thing. And if you look in the Darkei Moshe, Taka says that he holds that the Mordechai's reason of that it's cold. Nishta zeh. He says first of all, sometimes it's not so cold. And sometimes a guy could have good pillows and blankets. A guy has a good pelt, so he could sleep no matter what. He has a good sub-zero sleeping bag, he could sleep. What's the difference? Sometimes some people are not so affected by cold, meaning the Ramah Darkei Moshe seems to say, that's like a little bit vague of a reason to be samech for everybody. It's very personal, it's very particular. But the Ramah seems to hold that this not sleeping with the wife is more of a clear reason. Now, if you look in the Neisei Kelim, the Taz and the Magen Avram, both of them are mefakvik in this Ramah. And they each have different ways of tweaking it. Some say it's Teshuvah Ken Teduru. The Magen Avram, the Taz says something interesting. The Taz says you have a chiyav l'sameach eseshte b'yamtiv. There's a din, a person has to be misameach his wife on yamtiv. So that means even if it's not leil einer, even if it's not a time, even if she's tmeya, he's mechuyev l'sameach just to spend time with her, to sleep in the same room, to spend time with her, and therefore you're not allowed to sleep in the sukkah. This is what the Taz says. The Magen Avram says something different. So all the poskim on the page are highly aware of the fact that there's a long-standing kilu minig in Klal Yisrael from the Rishonim already, that the Olam is not so medaktik to sleep in the sukkah. The Taz, the Ramah, the Magen Avram, the Lavush, etc., all bringing various different time in for it. So everyone's aware that sleeping in the sukkah is not such a prevalent minig. It's not such a common minig. So really,
Was the meaning that the Bachram slept in the sukkah?
sometimes Bachram also were cold. You know what I'm saying? It was very cold. Oh, the Ramah, yeah. So they said they asked that, and the Gaon Lamaisa in Maaseh Rav and a little bit in the Hagais and Shulchan Aruch, the Gaon says he's not taken by the Ramaz, by this whole minig that the Rishonim are bringing in by the Ramaz thing, and the Gaon says no, you have to sleep in the sukkah, and it's important to be medaktik like the Ramaz says. This is the Gaon. Now, what's interesting to me is if you look in the Minchas Elazar, let's say the Mukei Archaim or the Aruch HaShulchan or even the Mishabura, the modern day poskim, they seem to their takeaway from all this tumult with the poskim, with all the various different reasons, is that really it's about cold. And I'll read you the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan over here in Tafresh Lamed Tes and Osid Aleph, he says as follows: in the Kvar Nisvar the Shina Chamira Me'achila. That feel Shina Sarai Aser. It was Nisvar already in the halacha that Shina is more chamer than eating. V'achshav ha'olam mekilim b'Shina. V'kvar Nisvar b'zer Rabbeinu or Ramah b'Sebeis. V'zel Shaynim Hashanoigin. Yeshem Mishum Detzina. Then he brings the second piece. Somewhere in there, I forget. The Aruch HaShulchan is somewhere in there, he brings the discussion with the Ramah, the two different reasons, and he says the main reason is that it's cold. Now, that seems to be the consensus of the poskim, is that the main reason why people weren't sleeping in the sukkah was because it was very cold. Now, based on that, in areas where it's not so cold, like Eretz Yisrael, for example, where it's not cold at all, where now the majority of from Jews live, probably, right, in Eretz Yisrael, and let's say even where we live today with climate change, it's not so cold in Tishrei anymore, and we're able, often you're able to sleep in the sukkah with comfort. It's not such a big deal. We don't live like in Eastern Europe. We're not living in Siberia. So, l'chaira, there'd be not such a reason not to sleep in the sukkah, which is why taka sleeping in the sukkah has been on the rise, meaning it's something that's becoming more and more popular, not less and less popular. It's something that even though the Ramah says that Ilum's not noyigin, today more and more people are noyig to sleep in the sukkah because the circumstances allow for it better. So now let's turn the attention to let's say Chabad's minig in particular, and really some say it's Bel's minig also. Let's turn to that minig in particular. So now the minig that stems from is really predates current Chabad. The Mittler Rebbe, who's the son of the Baal Tanya, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, he already, you would tell Bachram in particular, interesting, the Bachram were the ones who were trying to sleep in the sukkah, and he would tell the Bachram that the sukkah is too halig, the sukkah is the Ar Makif, the Bina, which we're not that I'm capable, but we're certainly not going to go into what that means. The Ar Makif, the Bina, and therefore you can't sleep in the sukkah. And he would tell them, how you talking to sleep in the sukkah? Mekana shlufen in the sukkah. A Yid, he said, can't even fall asleep in the sukkah. The Kedusha is so intense, and so, the Armak of Divina is so intense, it's not possible to fall asleep in the sukkah. Which is what the Mittler Rebbe would tell the Bachram. And therefore, he himself didn't sleep in the sukkah, and would encourage people around him not to sleep in the sukkah. Now, the Maisa, the Baal Tanya, and Shulchan Aruch Harav, says to sleep in the sukkah, and later the Lubavitcher Rebbe, after the Mittler Rebbe, probably did sleep in the sukkah. There's a lot of dispute in regards to that evidence, but it's likely that between the second Lubavitcher Rebbe and the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, they did sleep in the sukkah, meaning the third, fourth, and fifth. The first, third, fourth, and fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe's probably slept in the sukkah. The second, sixth, and seventh didn't. That's how it breaks out, probably. This again, you could go on Eitzar Chachma and read. Most of the literature on this is very partisan. It's people with a very strong agenda, one way or the other, either pro or against. So it's hard to get like the exact truth from amongst the discussion. But from what I could tell, that's the breakdown of who did and who didn't, and fine. So now the Middle Rebbe didn't because he said it was the Armak of Debina, it's too halig. Now the Riyatz, who was the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, he also didn't sleep in the sukkah, but he was extremely medactic in Idyani sukkah. He wouldn't eat, he wouldn't drink a mouthful of water out of the sukkah. He ate in the sukkah while it poured rain. He was extremely medactic in eating in the sukkah. Just sleeping he didn't do. Else this thing. Now when controversies erupted and things became discussed, so this minig of not sleeping in the sukkah became a particular target of critique on Chabad. They said, "Are you talking to be Eiker? Didn't Shulchan Aruch not sleep in the sukkah?" Now the Rebbe, the last Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1970, he spoke from the beginning of Elul all the way through Shabbos Bereshis. I think almost every sicha that he gave was about this minig of not sleeping in the sukkah and explaining Chabad's position on it. Later on in 1988 or something, when Likutei Sichos, whatever volume it is, volume 30 or something was published, so all this was published, and Rabbi Mazuz actually has the Sichos already in front of him when he's writing his critiques. But and here's basically the idea that Lubavitcher Rebbe presented. Now it's a chiddush. Let's be honest about it. It's a chiddush. It's not a. It's a very chassidish idea. He says as follows. He says, Be'etzem, like the Mittler Rebbe said, sleeping in the sukkah is Armak of Debina. It's a very halig place. And a yid kenish einschlafen b'chlal. It's impossible to fall asleep in there if you're really aware of the kedusha that's there. Alas, most people, even Groisei Tzadikim, are far from aware in a physical sense of the Armak of Debina that's in the sukkah. They don't feel it in any way, and they zikr could fall asleep in the sukkah. It wouldn't be a problem for them to fall asleep in the sukkah. But he says, the Chassidim who want to do like their Rebbe, meaning the Mittler Rebbe, they want to do like their Rebbe, who said that he could feel this Armak of Debina in the sukkah and can't fall asleep. So they're mitzvah that they don't feel it, and they're mitzvah that they can't do like their Rebbe, and therefore, in order to do like their Rebbe, they're pater from sleeping. That's also a form of mitzvah. That was the basic creative bridge that he created. He brings down first all the raid from the Paiskim and Tzimmer Tafresh Lamates about mitzvah, about it not being so easy to sleep in the sukkah because couples or because cold or whatever. And he says, okay, today there's an updated version of mitzvah. There's also a mitzvah of not being able to shtel zichzu to yenek kedusha. And in the few times that he discussed it, he brought a raya from a Gemara in Sukkah. There's a Gemara in Sukkah that talks about how many hadassim have to grow. If it has to be 3, 2, or 1. Now we today, in Shulchan Aruch, it's called the hadas shaita. If it only has 1, if there's no 3 growing clusters. But there's a man the Amar in the Gemara in Sukkah and the Flamet Aleph that says that since his Rebbe said even 1 is kosher, I would have to search out one that has 1 to use it. Why? Even the nafik mipumi demar. Since these words came out of my Rebbe's mouth, these were what my Rebbe said, my Paisik said, I'm mahader to try to do it, even though it's kilu shalaika halacha. It's not the proper way to do it, I'm mahader to do it. This is what the Gemara in Sukkah says. So says the Lubavitcher Rebbe in these various Maimarim, that emes a chassid, a true chassid, a committed chassid could say, Hayos nafik mipuma demar, my Rebbe said that you can't sleep in the sukkah, it's impossible to sleep in the sukkah, even though, granted, I am far from feeling that, I can't feel that, I can't relate to that. But Lamaisa, I can't feel that is also mitzvah and I can't sleep in the sukkah. Now, he also had a basic question, and this the Rebbe addressed. He said, if I'm telling you that the Mittler Rebbe said that it's Armak of Debina, it's the special light of Kedusha that's there, so how come nobody before the Mittler Rebbe knew this or felt this? Meaning, why is this a chiddush that the Mittler Rebbe had? There was other people other tzaddikim and gedolim and mekubalim and chachamim throughout the deiros who knew things. Well, why didn't they feel it? So to which he resolves and he says that Hayos, their shina itself, their sleeping itself, was not regular human shina. It was shina of kedusha. It was like halig asleep, so it wasn't a stira to the Armakif, and they were able to do it. This is the what do you say?
Eating is not a problem?
Eating? No, so I don't know. So this is call it mental calisthenics that the Rebbe in these mamarim does to create an updated mitzvah for the sukkah in this dar. Now, obviously, obviously this wasn't accepted by many. And I want to just read a little bit from Rebbe Mazuz and a little bit from Rabbi Yisrael David Hoffernes, who's a Satmar Dayan in Williamsburg, big Talmud Chacham, a prolific Mechaber Svarim, who both address these different Svaras, and let's just see the Tzaddik Keneged. So over here, he brings Rebbe Mazuz. He says, Yadua shekamim me'admori Chabad ha'yishenim b'sukkah. He says it's known that several of the Lubavitch Rebbe slept in the sukkah, even though some didn't, several did. V'chein noag again Rabbi Yaakov Landau Zatzal Av Bezdin B'nei Brak Uhinu Shem Yitzli Chabad V'lei Kilu B'zeh Mitam Lishim Tzelem Akif, and he wasn't machmir because of this. He says Rak the Admor Emtzai the Mittler Rebbe Admor Ha'achmor in the Lubavitch, and the last one. Amar Karchel She'ein Ze Ikar Atam V'lei Yitachin Lidches Halacha Psuk of Mishnah B'Gemara V'Rambam Shulchan Aruch V'nei Shina B'Tzelem Akif in the Bina. And this is the straightest argument against it. He says you cannot be doiche a din mefurish in Shulchan Aruch, a pasha din mefurish in Shulchan Aruch, and the Rambam and all the Paiskim because of this armak of the Bina. V'chiyat Tanoim v'Hamiram le'yadum mizeh. The Tanaim and the Amiram didn't know about the armak of the Bina. V'chiyat Rambam shelafi devreim hayim mekubel le'yadum mizeh. He says I got the whole. He says the Rambam was not a mekubel, but according to those who think the Rambam knew Kabbalah, the Rambam didn't know that there was armak of the Bina, and you have to be worried about this. Allah pasha shezet taisefes neifech hatayme yikr shel Ramah. Muzdach zayin that everything comes back to the main reason of the Ramah. And the Rebbes who were living in freezing cold Russia were being miyashiv and saying, I'll give you nachas svara why we don't do it. Meaning, of course, the main reason he says why the Mittler Rebbe didn't sleep in the sukkah was because it was freezing cold and it was dangerous to sleep in the sukkah. And the reason why he didn't want the Bachram to sleep there was because it was too cold. And they were being machmer to do something that was going to be harmful for them. But in Chsidish Eifen, he explained to them that also in Chsidish Eifen, it's not so good to sleep in the sukkah. He's saying that they got hung up on the wrong reason. The main reason was cold, and cold is not negay anymore. Medinas Chamas, Kamei Beretz Yisrael, v'Yosem Medinas HaMizrach, ein p'tor l'chsidei Chabad mitzashina b'sukkah, v'yishenu b'cholam akifim, ki kein tziva Hashem yisbarach. Sleep with all the aramakav that you could find, because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitzvah, v'shachve v'arv v'shinasam. Okay, then he continues on along this vein, okay, much more of the same. Now, if you look in Mekadesh Yisrael from Rabbi Yisrael David Hoffernes, he also has a shtickle over there. I want to read a drop if I can find it. He also goes through this Inyan. He says as follows. He says, Shemati sheyesh asher maklam yagidu lahem. He's quoting the Minchas Elazar. Shemanu milishim b'sukkah v'talo atzim be'ilan gadol she'echad me'akdoshim asher ba'aretz heim le'hei yashim b'sukkah. I've heard that there's a minig. He's quoting the Minchas Elazar really, who I don't think is talking about Lubavitch. The Minchas Elazar, I believe, is talking about bells. He never says Lahedyu he's talking about, but the Minchas Elazar, I think, was talking about the bells of minig. And he says, Shemati, that there are people who are toile in a Greisa mensch, and the Rebbe, I think he's referring to the bells of Rebbe, who did not sleep in the sukkah. And they say we can't sleep in the sukkah like the Rebbe didn't. He says, V'tmiya g'doila, mehai taima, leker halachim ufrashes b'shas b'paiskim. Just because some Adam Gadol didn't, for whatever reason he didn't sleep in the sukkah, he can't be oiker a din in Shas and Paiskim. Umashal lefnim ba'artzis Irapa, he'ezet tzadikim shalei yishenim b'sukkah, v'zeh machmas shebechelik hatzafin shal aretz Irapa, where they lived was freezing cold. He says this, that there was some Greisa tzadikim, Greisa rabbis who didn't. It was freezing cold, they couldn't sleep in the sukkah. He says, Umasha matu sheminig eda kadeshim mesuyim shal chasidim. Now he's talking about Lubavitch. Shalei lishim b'sukkah. B'sheker yisad, no, I'm sorry, this is bells, Vita bells. It's all bells. Mashi says that a minig of a certain Eid Kadeshim Mesoyim Shachsidim Shalishim B'sukkah B'sheker Yisadim Sharisi B'sefer Gedulas Yeshua, that he saw in a sefer, a bells a sefer, that the Sar Shalom of bells diktik Ma'oid Lishim B'sukkah. So again, what he's trying to show is the same thing that Rabbi Mazuz was showing, is that even amongst bells of Rebbes, it was far from a given not to sleep in the sukkah. Amongst Lubavitch Rebbes, amongst bells of Rebbes, meaning there was particular ones, particular circumstances. It was cold. It was they were weak. Some Rebbes are stronger than other Rebbes. Some Rebbes are healthier than other Rebbes. Not all are created equal. So he says, mitzad halacha, there's no makom. He says, this that you find that some didn't, they're very shvach. He says, Rabbi Lebelzi brings, was a very shvach person. He was ill, he was sick. He couldn't sleep in the sukkah. But of course, anyone who could has to. And then he continues on. He shows many minhagim that certain Chabad Chassidim did and certain Belz Chassidim did, to which he ends up saying, ultimately the same thing as Rabbi Mazuz and the same thing as the Minchas Elazar, is that you cannot be oiker a din mefurish in the Shulchan Aruch, a din mefurish in the halacha, because of this extra legal svara. You want to tell me that there are circumstances that don't allow it, there are individuals that can't do it, because for them, this realization that it's the Armakav makes them so bitzar, they can't sleep there? Sure. You want to tell me that it's cold, you want to tell me that your wife's not there, whatever svaras you want to tell me to be makel in a present l'cha'ifin, for sure. But to say, by and large, that the din in Shulchan Aruch goes away, because of that you can't do. Now, I just want to end with one very, very cynical remark from the Minchas Elazar, from the Mukei Chaim, and we'll end with this. He has over here I read it and I started laughing. He says, "Upashut she'ein lashgiach b'maisis hevel shalahem." Don't pay attention to Rebbe Shemaisis. He's talking about the Rebbe Shemaisis about people not sleeping in the sukkah. Ki zikna is keinasai tzivsel aviv is zikene b'teres mitzvahs kibbutz shalishim b'sukkah klal. Because his grandfather or his grandmother instructed his grandfather or his grandfather or his grandmother not to sleep in the sukkah because of kibbutz avim. He says, don't tell me some. He's making fun of the whole like. The Zayda told him not to because of whatever. He's like, don't tell me stories. If they were sick, ain't done in bezem izman lezman. So then there's no zushtel. How do you learn from what the temperature was then or the person was like then to now? I see many people who are good, fine, and strong with all the This is this is some very, very like a critical line from the Mechaz. He says, you can't tell me stories about a Messiah, about this, about that, about someone else. Are you strong enough to do it? Is the circumstance right to do it? And go do it. This is the Mechaz. So in any case, it's a what I would say to summarize, it's a controversial minig that well precedes Chabad. It became in this most recent tkufa like synonymous with Chabad, probably because Chabad, when the controversies erupted, there was issues that became discussed, and like this became the main issue. But it's be'etzem something that earlier Chassidim, Belzer Chassidim, Jikev Chassidim, Shendeshav Chassidim, there's a bunch of different ones who had these minhagim, each one for their own various reasons. The Ramah and Shulchan Aruch is already bringing it. So it's like this trick. It predates Chassidim, exactly by far. The Shach al which is one of the Talmidei Arizal, brings it. It predates all of Lubavitch and Chassidus and everything by a long stretch. But I guess the institutionalization of it, like of saying it like because of this reason, was the part that was triggering to various different Mevakri Mumim. And Mamela, this became like a big issue. In any case, this entire folder is hilarious to read. Everyone here is writing very funny. You're welcome to come schnar it. Good Yom Tif, good Kvittel, to be continued. No.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.